All right, so let's just do a quick demo of using the delete, fill, join, as well as the loop cut and slide operations we just went over. So here I have the staircase that we made for the extrusion demo, and I'm gonna use the tools we just went over to change the look of this a little bit. So we have like our basic steps, but if you wanted this to be a floating staircase, which what I mean by that is this sort of these open ones, so they just have steps, there's no risers, and you can see through them. So that is a floating staircase. So let's change our staircase into a floating staircase using the things we just went over. I'm going to press 3 to go into right orthographic view. I'm going to hold Z and select wireframe, because what I want to do essentially is keep these top steps and remove everything under them. So to do that, I'm just going to go into the right orthographic, into wireframe, so I can selecting through the mesh, so everything that is lined up with this view. So I'm going to drag out a box selection in face select mode, and we're just going to start deleting some of these faces. Box select, press X, delete the faces, X, delete faces. We're just going to do that all the way down. Okay, so that leaves me with this. Now, we have some problems here in that when we deleted those faces, these now are sort of open and have holes in them, so we're going to use our fill operation to fill these holes back up. So, started at either end, doesn't matter, we're just going to start selecting some of these faces. And the nice thing about these is, since they're quadrilateral and the vertices are all lined up, the fill tool should be able to detect them, not quite as an edge loop, but it should be able to detect how to fill these by just selecting a single edge and pressing F. And F, 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 all the way through to the top. Okay, so now we have all those holes filled up. But for a floating staircase, these steps need to be separated from each other. Right now they're connected, so if I were to move any of these, turn off snapping and move any of these, you can see that the problem that's going to come with it. So we need to separate these from each other a little bit. So let's do this with loop cuts. Now, keep in mind, there is no one set way to build any object in Blender. So although I'm showing you how to do it this way, this by no means means that this is the only way to model a staircase. It's just kind of about finding what tools and what workflows work for you, and then using them to your advantage. So we have 5 grid lines up approximately, and we can turn on snapping again to make this exact if we want to. So just making sure that we are zoomed in far enough to see these grid lines, because if we zoom out, these grid lines get cold essentially. They're not being rendered on the screen, and now when I add a loop, it just won't snap properly unless plus we can't really see where we're adding it. So we're just adding loops by pressing Control and R, adding the cut across this edge, and scooting it down so that just the bottoms are going to be affected by the next operation that we do. And I'm probably not getting these, the width of these exact to each other. You can spend a little bit more time on this if you want and get them very exact, but this is just a demonstration and a pretty quick one. Just Control R, click, Shift down. You'll see that snapping works with extrude. It also works with loop cuts. You'll see you'll notice that when you have snapping turned on, and you go into edge slide mode, it will snap as well. Okay, so that's probably close enough. This one looks a little large. Okay. So now I have this extra information basically on all these steps. So what I'm going to do now is select this face loop that I just created. I'm going to delete them so that there's a little bit more space in between these guys on the vertical. And you may be asking, like, why did we bother to fill all these faces when I'm just going to end up deleting them again? And that was because the way that our geometry was left after we deleted all the faces down here would make it so I would not be able to select these loops all the way around or place these loops very nicely. So it's a little bit of an extra step, but it's usually worth it. We're going to leave this last. Actually, no, we're not going to leave this last one. We're going to delete that one too. Just looking at, I have a reference image on another screen that I'm looking at just to make sure I'm making these somewhat correctly. Okay, so now let's delete all the faces, pressing X, deleting the faces. We can delete these ones too. Again, we just filled those in so that we could make those loops that I just made and make those selections properly. So you may want to adjust the spacing of some of these. I'm not going to do that because all that is transforming selections, which we've gone over extensively at this point. So I'm not going to do it here in the demo, but tweak the spacing and the size and the placement of these as much as you like. We're just going to fill these faces back in. Cool. So I'm just going to scale this along the Y just because these steps are look a little wide and the slope doesn't look quite as steep as it should be. So, these will give you your floating steps. And of course you would need to add the middle railing support and railings, which we can do. I'm actually going to delete what I just did because I noticed that I didn't tab out of edit mode. So when I tab out of this will be one object, which is fine, but it's just going to change the way we are able to rotate this cube. If I was to leave it in edit mode, because I'm going to rotate this, if I rotate this in edit mode, you'll notice that it doesn't affect the rotation of the object at all on a global scale. So I believe when I hit, yes, so when I hit, if I wanted to make this longer by scaling it along its local axis, the way we've been doing that, which would be scale YY, you'll see that it doesn't work because this scale operation is looking at the entire object's local rotation, which is not changed because I made all these edits in edit mode. So I'm going to get rid of this. Everything is selected on this object, which we went over briefly in another demo, but to select a whole connected pieces, but not the pieces that are not connected to each other, you just make a selection of either a vertex, an edge, or a face in that mode and press L to select linked. And we're going to delete the faces. I'm going to tab out of edit mode. And I'm going to add a cube now in object mode. So now when we scale it, move it. Now when we rotate it, we can hit scale Y, except that it's scale ZZ, and now we can make it elongated the way we want it to. Still have snapping on, which you don't need to leave on for this if you find that it's hindering your ability to create this. So looking at my picture, and it looks like the support beam just sort of comes to a flat angle with the ground. So I'm going to rotate it so it's just about flush. And I can hit scale Z0 to make sure it is exactly flush. And now we can scale it to fix this width issue that is created by the rotation. And again, you can spend, a ton of time on something like this and getting it really exact and really perfect and everything looking good, but this is just a demonstration, so we're going kind of quick. It would be something about like that, and then you would have floor connected here, obviously, so you wouldn't see this overshoot. And in fact, you'd probably even have it come out under the floor and not be attached, but it depends on what you're doing. Okay. That is pretty good. All right, so that concludes the quick demo on just a more practical use case for deleting, filling, and using loop cuts in an object. So in the next video, we're going to go over a few more operations, bevel and inset, before we do a larger demo with those tools and using those tools along with what we've learned so far to create more intricate objects and scenes. But that will conclude the demo for now, and I will see you in the next video.